Okay, we're continuing on our unit of systems of equations, and as soon as I say the word equations, you look at this particular problem and you're thinking, I don't see any equations, I just see a system of inequalities. Well, when we're in the town, may as well go visit inequalities while we're dealing with systems. So we are dealing with systems, but this time inequalities, and we have to, this time, graph the solution set of that system of inequalities. Because if you remember, the graph of only one of these is a shaded region. Okay, so we have to remember the graph of an inequality, linear inequality, is a shaded region, and that's going to change some vocabulary. So when we're looking at a system of inequalities, we have to deal with what is the solution to a system of inequalities. And that's going to change some vocab a little bit. So when we were dealing with equations, we knew that the solution is the ordered pair where the two lines cross, where the two lines meet. But what about when we're dealing with a system of inequalities and we're dealing with shaded regions? So we're looking at now shaded regions that meet. So the solution to a system of inequalities is the shaded region that meets, okay, or the shaded regions that overlap. Okay, that's where they all meet. Okay, so you have on one graph, okay, on one ordered coordinate plane, you'll have one or two or three graphs with shaded regions, and the solution is where those shaded regions overlap. And so we're going to see visually what might that look like, and if then that is the solution, we can then answer some questions about it. We can talk about an ordered pair that's in the solution and an ordered pair that's not in the solution. Very similar to what we did in Common Assessment 4. Okay, so this is linking back to Common Assessment 4. So we have our system of inequalities, and we have to graph each one of them, but on the same coordinate plane. All right, so we're going to start with our first inequality, which is y is less than negative 1/2 x plus 4. And we're going to sketch the graph of this inequality. And since we're graphing it, we can tell a few qualities. Okay, we can tell that it already looks like it's in slope-intercept form, right? And since it looks like it's in slope-intercept form, we can tell quite easily that the slope is negative 1/2, which means we're going down 1 and right 2. And the y-intercept is at 4, which means we're going to begin at 4. On the y-axis, okay, so we can tell all this information just by looking. We don't have to touch that inequality. We can just tell by looking. But what about the shaded region? Again, from Common Assessment 4, this requires some shading. Because it says y is less than, we now have shaded regions. Less than means we are shading down. That's what less than means. And then not or equal to means we're going to have a dotted line. This doesn't say or equal to, so we're going to have a dotted line. So all that from Common Assessment 4. Okay, so we're shading down from a dotted line, and that's all of this information just from that one inequality. Again, we don't have to touch it. We don't need to manipulate anything. We can tell by looking at it all of these qualities, and with that, we can go ahead and graph it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and graph everything we just mentioned. So we sketched the coordinate plane, and then we can start doing what we said we should do. All right, so we said we should begin at 4. I'll keep this one in red. So we begin at 4. And then we're going to count our slope down 1, right 2. So we go down 1 and right 2. And there's our second point. And then we have to remember we're dealing with a dotted line. So instead of making a solid line going through those 2 points, we're going to make a dotted line going through those 2 points and all the way through. And then we listen to our shading. And it says we're shading down. So basically, we put our pen anywhere on the graph and just point it down. And we don't need to color in crazy yet, because we have to keep in mind what we're looking for. Now keep in mind what we're looking for. So back to the vocabulary. We're looking for all the shaded regions that overlap. So don't go crazy shading in. We want to keep it nice and light so you'll be able to tell some things later. So all we've done is graph that first inequality, and there it is. Now what we're going to do is graph the next inequality. Okay. So now we have the next one. X is greater than or equal to -3. And you got to remember, well, how do we graph that? So remember the graph is, this is how I work with students on this. The graph is the set of all ordered pairs that makes that statement true. So we're looking at the set of all ordered pairs that has an x of -3. So the graph is the set of all ordered pairs with x at -3. Okay, so that's how we graph this. Remember, graphs are the set of all ordered pairs that make a true statement. This graph is the set of all ordered pairs that have an x of -3. So for example, we could make up stuff as long as we have an x at -3, like -3, -5, and -3, 2. Okay, so that's the example. The only trick is, what's the deal with greater than or equal to? Okay, so greater than or equal to. Well, first, let's sketch our graph. And I'll keep this one in blue. All right, so we're at -3, -5. Here's -3, there's -5, and here's -3, +2. And no matter which order pairs you've picked, we're going to come up with the same thing. We're dealing with a vertical line, right? So the first thing we need to know is that vertical line going to be solid or dotted? And since it's saying or equal to, it's going to be a solid line. Okay, and again, you can refer back to Common Assessment 4. Okay, so we're dealing with a solid line, so we can go ahead and make our solid vertical line. But what about the shaded region? Okay, this is saying greater than, so we're thinking shade up, right? But shade up what? This is up nothing, it's a vertical line. So which way is greater than? And when we're dealing with a vertical line, it's basically shade greater, and in this case, that's going to be to the right. Okay, so greater when it comes to vertical is to the right. Okay, so we're going to be shading everything to the right of that line. And once again, don't go crazy on the shading, all right? We're not looking for the darkest pit. Right? We're just looking for a general sense of direction, because overall, we're looking for where all the regions overlap, okay? So that's how we shade or graph that second inequality. Right, so far we've graphed this inequality, but what about that third one? And I'll work on the third one in black ink. So we've sketched our first two, time for the last one. Let's sketch the fourth one. And we're looking at y is greater than -5. So here's the inequality that we're looking to graph. And remember from before, what is a graph? A graph is the set of all ordered pairs that makes the statement true. So we're looking for all ordered pairs that have a y at -5. Okay? So we're looking for the set of all ordered pairs with y at -5. And if you're doing your homework, you'll see there's plenty of assignments, plenty of problems in there that deal with sketching vertical and horizontal lines. I'm able to work with a lot of you on that. So this should be good if you're doing your assignments. You know, if you're slacking off, of course, this is going to be challenging. So anyway, the graph is a set of all ordered pairs with y at -5. So we can pick, a couple of examples, something like, -3, -5, and maybe +2, -5. So either way, we have a couple things going on with -5. The only question now is, what about the shading? Okay, so the shading, again, we're still dealing with y is greater than, and we know what that means. We're going to be shading up because it's greater than, up is greater than, and a dotted line because it's not or equal to. And again, if you're really confused on that, I refer you have to go back to Common Assessment 4 and the video notes on graphing inequalities. Okay, so we're just putting all that together here. So we're going to sketch our graph. We have the two ordered pairs, -3, -5. Here's negative 3, negative 5. Okay, so we already graphed that one. What about 2, negative 5? That's down here, right? So we have 2, negative 5, and we have our 2 points that are there. We have the point here and the point there. And we can pick any, it doesn't matter which. You know, you're going to see a horizontal line emerging. But before we sketch the graph, make sure you remember we're having a dotted line for that one. So we're going to make a dotted line. Dot, 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 dotted line. And then now we have to consider the shading. Okay, so we said before we're going to shade up. Okay, so we said we're going to shade up from that line. So again, we're going to shade up from that line. Again, don't go crazy, because we're just looking for reference now. And we'll go crazy right about now. So remember, we have all of these things we've just sketched, right? But the note. The solution to a system of inequalities is where all the shaded regions overlap. So we have 3 shaded regions in this picture. Where do they all overlap? And you can see there's a boundary here, a boundary here, and a boundary here. All of the regions there have the blue ink, the red ink, and the black ink. So all 3 regions overlap there. And then that is the region, if you want to go crazy with the coloring, crazy color in the solution region. Okay, the set where all 3 regions overlap. That's where you want to go crazy with the coloring. Okay, so you want to make that one darker. So that way I can tell you know what you're doing. And so we have now created our shaded region. Once we've created our shaded region, it's very similar to, again, I go back, Common Assessment 4, graphing inequalities. Okay, we go back to that. Once we have our shaded region, we can now give an ordered pair that's in the solution and give an ordered pair not in the solution. Okay, so when we look at our shaded region, we can clearly tell any ordered pair that's inside of the shaded region, something like down here, you know, maybe positive 2, negative 4 is in the shaded region, right? Positive 2, negative 4 is down here. And then something not in the shaded region. Okay, so something maybe up here, over here, maybe down further here. So I'll pick something way up here, like, you know, like positive 4, and then maybe positive 23, because that for certainly is not going to be on this graph, right? So positive 4, positive 23, way up. It's not going to be on there. Okay, so once you have your shaded region, you can clearly answer the rest. So all that this question is doing is taking together a bunch of prior knowledge, especially from Common Assessment 4, graphing inequalities, putting them together and recalling the one note for this lesson, which is the solution to a system of inequalities is the shaded region that overlaps. Thank you very much.